Hi, I'm Sam Ettus.
And I'm Amy Nelson. Welcome to What's Her Story with Sam and Amy.
This is a show about the world's most remarkable women, their professional and personal journeys.
Together, we'll hear from gold medalists, best-selling authors, and leaders of the world's most iconic brands.
Listen every Thursday or join the conversation anytime on Instagram at What's Her Story Podcast. Hi, everyone. This is Sam. And today I am interviewing my podcast partner and dear friend, Amy Nelson, who has gone through big public turmoil. And she was brave enough to do this interview with me today so that we can all learn from it. But this is an ongoing legal case, so there are certain topics that were out of bounds. And of course, this is part one. There will be a part two of the Amy Nelson story, but it won't be coming next week. It will be coming when part two unfolds.
Thank you. I will try my best to do it. It's hard to talk about, as you know.
So, Amy, what was your life like 2.5 years ago? Give us a sense of what your life was like.
It was fun. So I was living in Seattle with my husband, Karl, and my 4 daughters, Sloan, Reese, Merritt, and Holland. I think Sloan would have been five then? Yep, 5. And Holland was a baby, right? She wasn't even walking, still breastfeeding. I was scaling my company, The Riveter. I think we had about 100 employees at that point. We had gone from an idea to 100 employees in about 30 months, which was wild and hard, but exhilarating. I was always on a plane, crisscrossing the country from Seattle to open new Riveters. We were in 6 states. I was, writing a column for Inc. It was a lot.
So, it sounds like your life was a lot of fun.
My life was a lot of fun. I mean, it was hard, but it was like hard by my own making, right? Like I was the one who was like, oh, I want to start a company. I want to have 4 kids. I want to do all of this crazy stuff all at once, right? So it was magical. Like I remember thinking at my 40th birthday, which was in early 2020, like, how did I get this lucky?
And then in April of 2020, the pandemic had just begun, a month or 2 earlier, and your entire world changed. What happened?
On the morning of April 2nd, 2020, which was about, for my family, like 2.5, 3 weeks into the pandemic, at around 6:45 in the morning, there was a knock on our door. And of course, I was like, who the hell is at my door at 6:45 in the morning? And we had a glass door. We lived on a busy street, and we had a glass door. We had just bought our house. It was the first house we bought. We bought it in 2017. And I go to the door, and there's a woman and a man. And I had Holland on my hip in her diaper. She'd just woken up. And I looked out the door, and I was like, who are these people? And then the woman flashed a badge. And it said FBI. And I opened the door, and they said, we're here to talk to your husband, Karl and Nelson. And I said, okay. And I yelled for Karl, and he came over. And I looked at Karl, and I looked at the agents. And I'm a lawyer, Sam. As you know, I practiced law for a decade. And I said to my husband, I go, Karl, you cannot talk to these people without a lawyer. Like, no matter what. And I was just like, public service announcement. Law enforcement never wants to talk to you, like on a friendly basis. Get a lawyer, no matter what. People feel like if they get a lawyer, it means they've done something wrong. It doesn't. A lawyer protects your interests. But my husband said, I'm fine to talk to them for a minute. So he took them upstairs and he talked to them. And they asked him a few questions. And they asked him if he knew about this business entity. And he said, I know of it, but I don't know a lot about it. And they said, well, this is your chance to back up. This is your chance to save yourself. We know everything. And my husband was like, what? And then he said, you know what? I need to talk to my lawyer. And they left. And then, but before they left, they handed him a couple letters telling him he was the target of a federal investigation in the Eastern District of Virginia related to his former employment at Amazon Web Services. And that started everything.
What had Karl been doing at Amazon?
Karl worked at Amazon Web Services, which is Amazon's division that builds the internet, really. The internet lives in these big warehouses called data centers, and they're full of these servers that power the internet. Amazon Web Services powers 50% of the internet. So, like, huge company, right? And my husband started at Amazon Web Services in 2012 when it was about 5,000 employees, very small. And he spent 7 years there. Their revenue grew like 100x or something in that time, something crazy. And he worked in real estate. So he helped the company and the people who made the decisions. He helped them figure out like if they should buy a piece of land to build a data center or if they should work with a developer to lease data center space. So he worked on that stuff.
How did you and Karl meet?
So Carl and I met in 2011. I had moved to Minneapolis from New York, which was like a big move for me. I was 31 and wanted to move back to the Midwest where I grew up. And I met this wonderful woman named Molly, Sam, who you know. And she was also a lawyer and had lived in New York. And we were chatting. And like the first day we met, she was like, you know, you need to meet my older brother's best friend. And I was like, why? She's like, you guys will I can't explain it, but you need to meet him. And she introduced us, and that's my husband. Like we met for the first time in September of 2011. We went out for drinks, and then we were always together after that.
What did you love about him?
He's brilliant. He's so kind and generous, kindest, most loyal person you'd ever meet. He is so smart, so ambitious. And he's like, we just share the same values, right? We both were people who wanted to live a big life and like felt that we could both live our big lives, come together and build something great, but both do really big things on our own. And I'll say that I think like for a woman to find a partner like that, like it's not the dynamic you're told that you're going to have in America, right? And like that was just, I mean, Karl has supported me in every big thing I've done and like pushed me to do it, not just supported me, but been like, of course you can do this. I remember when I started the Riveter, he said, if you're going to take the bat, swing it as hard as you can. Right. And like, that's his personality.
So the FBI comes to your door, and what happened after that? When did you realize this is not a one-day thing?
I realized it immediately because I called. So this is where fortunate you're a lawyer. And like, I will say every step of every day, like, I don't think we would have survived this far if I wasn't a lawyer because we had access to other lawyers that I could call and get advice from. I am a trained litigator. I'm trained to fight. I'm trained to find the facts, all of these things. But I called, I didn't know he got a letter saying he was a target of a federal investigation. And when you're under federal investigation, you can be a target, a subject, or a witness. It's all very formal. Like it's very formal. There's this whole prosecutorial industry in this country that I didn't even know about. I don't say that flippantly, like it is big business. And when I told this lawyer that I used to work with in New York, he's like, read the letter to me. And I read it. And they're like, Karl's a target. And generally, when you get a target letter, you are indicted for a federal crime within 60 days. Like, it's like they think you committed a crime and it's going. And so we hired a lawyer. And I will tell you, the first law firm that we hired fired Karl after 2 weeks because they represented Amazon and other matters, which was like, that was terrifying and traumatic. And we wasted a lot of money. We hired great lawyers, and I will also say that Karl immediately wanted to talk to Amazon because he was like, "What is going on here?" Like Karl, it was just he could not understand this. So he has tried to speak to Amazon directly multiple times over the past 2 years. Nothing to hide.
Tell us in layman's terms what this case is about and what is it that he's being accused of?
Amazon accused my husband of a very specific crime called private sector honest services fraud. It is depriving your private employer of your, quote, honest services. So they allege that my husband steered data center leases to a certain developer in exchange for kickback payments. So that is their accusation. They made it, I now know, in tandem with a group called IPI, which is a billionaire investment fund led by Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, a lot of billionaires. IPI and Amazon accused my husband of this crime to the FBI. So that's the allegation. And I will say too, because I think it's important, and I always say this, you said this case. The government has never charged my husband. It's like there is no criminal case. There's just allegations. So over 2 years in, there's just allegations.
So every day, do you wake up hoping that he'll just be charged with something so life can move on? Or what happens? I mean, what are you hoping for on a daily basis?
I hope it ends. I hope that, like, I mean, I've always hoped that Amazon would speak to him directly. Uh, it is surprising to me that the company would choose to spend millions of dollars on lawyers rather than speak directly to an employee that worked for them for 7.5 years and has nothing to hide. That's frustrating to me endlessly. Seattle's a small community, and we know a lot of the people at Amazon.
So, talk to us about the financial burden this has cast on your family. And Amazon took your money.
It feels like Amazon took our money, but so I'll just go like to the basics of this because I didn't understand this. The day the FBI came to our house in April of 2020, the other letter they handed my husband said, "We intend to seize these bank accounts from you." And I was like, "What the hell is this? Like they're just going to take our money?" And there's a practice in America called civil forfeiture where law enforcement authorities can seize your money on the suspicion of a crime. They do not have to prove a crime, they do not have to charge you with a crime. They can take your money and say your money is a crime. And then you have to hire lawyers to fight to get it back. In May of 2020, so a month and a half after the FBI came, the federal government, on a random Tuesday, took all of the money out of our bank accounts. Every dollar. And I think, I mean, I went from like, well, they took it from our lawyer's client trust account. And, I didn't know it at the time, but this is a prosecutorial tool to get you to plead guilty. 97% of people who are accused of a federal crime plead guilty. We don't really have a jury system in America. We have a plead guilty system. And there are certain things prosecutors can do when you don't plead guilty to get you to plead guilty. One of them is leave you penniless. So not only can you not feed your family, you cannot defend yourself in court. Um, so yeah, I mean, so they took all of our money. And I will say after 2 months after they took all of our money, Amazon, knowing the government had taken all of our money based on their accusations, Amazon then sued my husband. I mean, it's very cruel.
For what?
Oh, they have sued my husband for like 10 things. So, RICO, which is like a criminal gang, right? The RICO statute was for the mafia. Um, so, RICO, which was racketeering, it's racketeering. And when you accuse someone of RICO, it's basically a civil way for like you or I, Sam, to say someone committed a crime. So, same thing, private sector honest services fraud. They also alleged that my husband, violated federal antitrust laws. They said he rigged land prices. I mean, my husband's great, but I don't think that any single human could rig land prices.
So, Amy, what exactly happened when your money was taken? I mean, how does a family of six survive that?
We're really lucky, I guess, is the way, and I shouldn't feel that way. I feel lucky that we have survived, even though the money never should have been taken. Um, we I mean, very specifically, after the government came on April 2nd, we opened another bank account and started putting our earnings in that new bank account. So they didn't get that one bank account. They took literally everything else. Um, Carl was able to work. He was a very successful consultant in real estate development at the time, and he was able to work until August of 2020 when the accusations became very public. So we had some money coming in. I had my riveter salary for a while, um, and then we started selling things. We liquidated retirement. We sold our car. And then eventually I realized in October of 2020 that we needed to sell our house quickly.
What was that decision like for you?
I, you know, I just have kept moving. It's hard when like to stop and think about it. But like that was the house I thought my girls would grow up in. We worked so hard for the down payment for that house.
And at that point, you had also become kind of a very well known person in Seattle. You were one of the most high profile entrepreneurs in Seattle. You had added so many jobs to the Seattle economy, and then you're selling a home and basically saying goodbye to a life that you had created in this city.
Yeah, and we just left. Like we were really fortunate. I had a good friend who had helped us buy the house, and I called her, and she knew what we were going through, and I said, we have to sell this, and like, I'm not capable of like doing anything. And so Mia just like did everything. She told us to, we got movers, and paying for the movers was hard, right? Like there are all these things. Like we had to find a way to pay for the movers, which is a lot of money, and we put our stuff in storage. I had to find someone to take our dog. But we just, and we had some good friends, but we left Seattle in our minivan with like 5 bags.
And where do you go?
It was raining. Um, so, I mean, that was kind of the big question. I was like, where do we go? Because it was the pandemic and we had four kids, four babies. Um, and my dad, I wanted to go home to Ohio, but my dad had a kidney transplant in April of 2020, about 2 weeks after everything started for us. And so my dad, as a kidney transplant recipient, had to be so, so careful with COVID. So we literally just couldn't go to Ohio. My sister lived in San Francisco, and I just didn't see how we could stay there for a long time with her. My brother-in-law lived in a condo in Chicago, so that was out. And we were really lucky because Carl's dad and stepmom lived in Honolulu, so we could stay with them. So we drove to California and stayed with my sister for a month in her basement. And then we flew to Honolulu at the height of the second wave. I put all my kids on a plane, which was really scary. There were 10 people on the plane. I mean, it was when nobody was going anywhere. And we flew to Honolulu and we stayed there until August. So we were there from November of 2020 until August of 2021.
And then you returned to Columbus, Ohio.
We did. We returned to Columbus, Ohio. I don't, I think we would have stayed in Honolulu maybe a little bit longer. But I took on a role to help launch a company in New York. And we desperately needed that money. And so I was commuting between Honolulu and New York for a few months, which was impossible.
To your job at Saks Works.
Yep. So we went to Ohio, and I was able to fly to New York every Monday to Thursday while I was launching the company.
So I guess, like, thinking about the girls and how disruptive this has been to their lives, how have you shielded them from all of this, or have you?
So, Sam, it's really interesting. They are now 7, 5, 4, and 2. So this has been going on for the majority of my baby's life, right? And then my Reese is about to have her 3rd birthday with this going on, and she'll turn 6. Um, I know that I haven't shielded it from them completely. It's impossible. People always tell me I'm handling this with such grace, but I'm not. It's ugly, it's messy, it's scary. Um, but I read a lot of books when I was a kid, and I read a lot of books growing up in my 20s and 30s, and I love adventure stories. And so I tried to treat it like an adventure with the kids. They got to see all these different places and go on all these big adventures. And we've tried to really frame it like that. And I think it's mostly worked.
How do you mom on the days when you just feel hopeless?
The mothering has saved me. Because, you've got these 4 little girls. And like, I have these 4 little girls. And so I've always felt that, like, if our life is over, me and Carl, like, they could still have a life. So I had to give them everything and, like, all the love I had. Also, when we got back to Ohio, I had my parents. And on the hardest days, my parents can help.
How has this changed your friendships and your relationships? Have you lost friends, gone closer to others? I mean, what does this kind of crisis do to your relationships?
you realize who your friends are. That's the easiest way to put it. Like, friendship is not something that we have when it's just convenient, right? Like, you have to be a friend in hard times too. And my friends have been remarkable, like you. I mean, like, you basically some days just like forced me to just do things, right? Um, which is a good friend. And but I've lost some friends, and I definitely know there are a lot of people in the world who, when someone is accused of the crime, think they committed it. And I know that Amazon knows that.
Let's go back to that for a minute. Was there ever a time when you doubted your husband's innocence, even in in the very beginning?
Absolutely not. No. My husband would never do anything he thought was illegal.
Where is everything today? Where is the case today, and what's next?
Well, it's interesting, Sam, because so the Amazon civil case where Amazon sued my husband is in discovery. So that means for the first time in years, my husband's lawyers and my husband are seeing all of the documents around Amazon's allegations, uh, including the documents that they shared with the Department of Justice in their effort to get Karl charged with a crime. Um, so that's in discovery. And soon, Karl's lawyers will depose, which means kind of like interview under oath, all of the Amazon executives that are accusing my husband of a crime. And then I don't know what's happening with the government investigation. You don't really get insight into that. Karl's never been charged with a crime. But with the civil forfeiture, um, yesterday, we learned that we were getting almost all of our money back. So 21 months after the government took it, and after we sold everything and we've tried to survive and navigate paying for lawyers to defend ourselves against Amazon, we're getting the money back.
And when is that going to hit your account?
I know that the government filed a motion yesterday that they were giving it back to us, and then the judge has to, I think, sign off on the motion, and then we will call the U.S. Marshal Service, who has our money, and get it back.
Amy, I can't help but think this is uncanny timing because on Monday of this week, I'm interviewing you on a Friday. On Monday, you launched a GoFundMe campaign to pay for your family's legal bills, which have mounted to how much in a month are you spending on legal bills, Amy?
Right now, between $40,000 and $50,000. It's shocking.
And by the way, it's not surprising then that 97% of people plead guilty when there's a forfeiture because who could survive that? I mean, who can afford this?
Nobody. And I will say there weren't many months we've been spending that much, but now to defend ourselves, I'm not in the Amazon lawsuit, but for Karl to defend himself against Amazon, it's that much. And I will say, Amazon's lawyers are around $1,000 an hour. They use a very big fancy law firm called Gibson Dunn, who Facebook hires and Apple hires, all the big tech companies hire. And their lawyers are $1,000 an hour. And they have like 5 lawyers on every call. So, Amazon is spending untold millions of dollars on this.
So on Monday, you launched this GoFundMe campaign. And how many people have contributed to that?
Almost 300, which is like, Sam, I feel like Amazon has been so loud in calling my husband a criminal for so many years that I feel like people just assume he is, or people assume he's been charged with a crime when he hasn't. And so for all of these people, some I know, some I don't, to support him is like, it's amazing.
But the timing of you getting your money back there had to be an association with Amazon seeing, the government seeing this GoFundMe campaign and giving you your money back.
I don't know. So really what happened, and one of the reasons we launched the GoFundMe is the civil forfeiture. They took the money and we've never been able to fight to get it back. And it was finally time for us to litigate with the government on our money and have discovery. So we would have been able to depose the FBI agents who came to our house and investigated my husband. And when we finally had that opportunity, the government settled with us rather than go through that process. And I had launched a GoFundMe because this was now like another lawsuit we had to fight, right? When your money is taken, you have to pay lawyers to fight to get it back. And so it's finally our opportunity to fight to get it back, and they settled.
So what will happen now to the GoFundMe money?
It will go directly to our law firm. I mean, we have spent an enormous amount on lawyers, and we will continue to. And even though our money is returned, that could easily be eaten up entirely by lawyers' fees as well.
So you get the money back, but that's only a very small part of the sort of the pain that your family has experienced. It's affected your career, it's affected your friendships, it's affected, I'm sure, your marriage and your family. What has the impact been on your career?
So I'll start by saying that the investors and the Riveter have been amazingly supportive, and I am forever grateful. I'm lucky because a lot of people could have chosen not to be. The Riveter, if you don't know, I had raised $30 million for my company, and we were an in real life company, so we weathered a traumatic pandemic as well, but we have survived somehow. But during the pendency of all this, I had to seek other employment. I had to make more money, and that I had some people who were willing to take me on to launch things, and I had other people who, when they found out about what was going on with my husband, attached me to it and refused to hire me because of it. Also, like, if you Google me, everything I've ever done in my life is not first now. This is first. This is part of our story. It's the story people learn first now. And, I think for about a year, right, Sam, I didn't say anything about it. And then there was a lot of press. And then I was like, you know what? I have to own this. I think there's power of the accusers if the accused are silent. I think if you speak out, you have a better chance.
Talk about the decision to speak out, because a lot of people in your situation would say, okay, we need to at least preserve Amy's career right now. She's going to be the breadwinner for a while until this all goes away. And we don't want to do anything to jeopardize that. Was there a lot of thought put into you speaking out, or one day you just realized, I have to speak out?
So there's a lot of thought put into me not speaking out because of the things you just said. I needed to be the breadwinner, etc. But the government took one of my bank accounts too, because we had paid lawyers through my bank account. And so they said that I laundered money for Karl. So it all sounds so, anyway. And so I was named in the forfeiture actions. And so I became a part of it. And so that choice was taken from me. Whether that was an intentional choice by the government to bring me into it, to hurt my family further, or whether it was just happenstance, I don't know. But, eventually, like, I reached a point where I thought, I'm good enough at what I do that I can consult, I can make money for my family. But the most important thing for me is that my husband is home with us, his freedom. My little girls need their dad.
So what does that look like today?
His freedom?
Yeah, and his chances at clearing this up and just moving on.
I mean, I don't know. We've gotten, in civil discovery, our lawyers have seen the communications between Amazon and the government. And I can tell you that Amazon has met with the government at least 89 times to lobby the government to charge my husband with a crime. That feels terrifying. It also feels like if they've been trying to do this for 2 years and my husband hasn't been charged with a crime, like, what does their allegation look like? I know that we will fight until we can't fight anymore, that if Karl is charged with the crime, we will take it to trial. And we will just keep trying.
Are there any risks to speaking out? Like, do you ever worry about poking a bear, Amazon being the bear?
So it's funny, Karl and I were talking about this a long time ago. And I was like, I don't want to make them, quote them, mad. Whether that's Amazon, Department of Justice, anybody, I don't know. And Karl said, they're already mad. They're already mad. Amazon built a narrative and controlled a narrative. I'm a storyteller. Amazon built a narrative. They built a narrative to the Department of Justice. They built a narrative in filing a public complaint in a court of law that anybody can read. Um, and most reporters will read the allegations and repeat them in their stories. And so I think the only way to tell Karl's story is to tell Karl's story and to tell our family's story. And I believe in justice and I believe in fairness. It's been a North Star in my life. I've been involved in politics since I was a kid. I was interning at the Ohio State House when I was in high school. I worked for Jimmy Carter. I was on Obama's National Finance Committee. Like, justice is important to me. And this has really challenged my core beliefs. Really, the civil forfeiture piece of it did, right? Because it's like, don't take away our ability to fight. Like, you can't deem money guilty if someone hasn't even been charged, let alone tried for a crime. And so speaking out too has allowed me to start thinking of how I can lobby for change for others.
I mean, what I think watching this, having sort of a front row seat to what you've been going through, I think is obviously I've learned so much just from what you've been through. It's even though I hear about it every day, I still have a very hard time making heads or tails of all of these accusations and all of these things. And I find it so astounding. I mean, I hope that my kids go to law school. I feel like what would have happened if Amy Nelson was not an attorney? I mean, where would this case be today?
I don't know. Like and I'm not saying I'm not like some like magic maker, but I can say that trying to help somebody who is accused understand the accusations, just that part, helping my husband understand the accusations, because he was like, what the hell is happening? Right? Like, you have to generally pay a lawyer lots and lots of money to understand the accusations, right? And then also like gathering facts and all of these different things. It's money, that's money. And so the fact that he had someone who could help him do those things, I think was helpful. I hope. And also, I was able to understand and assess the risks and say, I stand with you and I support you in fighting. Because I will tell you, Sam, there were a lot of people who gave the advice to my husband, just plead guilty, even if you didn't commit a crime, to get it over with. Because you're never going to beat him. You can't afford it. Just plead guilty. And that to me was like shocking. But that is a lot of the advice given, because the process is insane.
Well, and honestly, and watching you go through this, like, I don't think it's such bad advice, because if there's a way to speed this up and make this go away and be over, like, you are living in some sort of prison right now for the last 2 years.
Yeah, and then that's by design, right? Like, it's by design. But listen, like, if Karl pled guilty, he didn't commit a crime, and it's like there's a bunch of people accused. So if he pleads guilty, then all the other people have to deal with the repercussions of his guilty plea, if that makes sense.
I actually want to talk about that, because I remember at one time sort of hearing about the other people who were accused. You had this very robust income going into this. What if you had been a stay-at-home parent who'd given up your career? Where would the Nelson family be today?
We'd be in trouble, right? And that's it's my parents are amazing, and my mother always worked. And when I was 16 years old, my father lost his job. And I remember thinking when I was 16, if my mother didn't work, we would be in so much trouble. And in that day, I knew that I would always work. And that's my life story, and that impacted me in that way, and I'm grateful and lucky for it. But there are other people involved in this that don't have that, and it's got to be really, really hard.
How is this experience? You're obviously still in the thick of it, but how do you think it's changed you?
I think, listen, like, there are a lot of things, like, I know how fragile life is, and I didn't before in this way, but like, whatever you thought your life was could literally go away in an instant. And I know that I'm so fortunate that I didn't learn that lesson until I was 40. But I think, like, there are some really crappy things. Like, Sam, as you know, in June of 2020, the government executed a search warrant on our house with 4 armed FBI agents that brought guns into my house, and my little girls were there. I don't feel safe.
So you have a little bit of PTSD from that experience.
I'd say a lot, actually. Yeah, I've been diagnosed with trauma. It's actually called continuous trauma syndrome. because the threat is not gone. Because one other tactic that prosecutors can use when someone doesn't plead guilty of a crime is to the threat of arresting them in their home. They do it a lot. So they come and arrest you in your home, usually before dawn, and drag you out with guns in front of your kids. They threatened to do that for many months, and so I started waking the girls up at 5 a.m. and taking them out of the house to a park for months when we were still in Seattle.
It's unthinkable.
It's just, I have to say, like, listen, these allegations are serious. Karl takes them seriously. I take them seriously. Like, he's more than willing to defend himself if given the opportunity to do so. But you realize a lot of this, like the criminal justice system it seems in some ways like a chess game, right? Like, do we need to be spending resources on like tactical military engagements to arrest people because they won't plead guilty? Or can they just walk in, and accept the charges? Like it, right? Like, and the trauma it brings on children and loved ones. Is that necessary? Is that who we are? Is that what we want as a country? Is that important to us?
When was the last time you felt just truly happy?
There have been moments, right? Like you learn to live. You get used to things, right? Like this thing is my baseline now. Like we found out yesterday all of our funds were being returned. And like, Sam, I didn't feel peace. I didn't feel anything. Like, which I'm like, what is wrong with me? I just thought, okay, one battle. There's more to fight. That's what I felt.
So, Amy, thank you for being on our show, your show, and for sharing your story. As I mentioned earlier in the show, part 2 will come, but it won't come for a while until we know how this all unfolds. And in the meantime, obviously, I am rooting for you, and I know that our listeners are too.
Thank you, Sam. I love you. Thanks for being my friend. Thanks for listening to What's Her Story with Sam and Amy.
We would appreciate it if you leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, connect with us on social media at What's Her Story Podcast.
What's Her Story with Sam and Amy is powered by my company, The Riveter, at theriveter.co, and Sam's company, Park Place Payments, at parkplacepayments.com.
Thanks to our producer, Stacey Para, and our male perspective, Lou Burns.